6 years ago, I took my kids on a summer getaway. When we got to our hotel, it was obvious that something big was happening. In the parking lot, there were vendors under those pop-up tents, tailgaters drinking beer, a fleet of out-of-state pickup trucks plastered with bumper stickers. Inside the hotel, a crowded lobby of guys with an aging rock fan feel. And from a distant room, a cacophony of electronic sounds, laughter, and what sounded like chimes. A few hours later, I ditched the kids and drifted into a giant hall that looked like the world's biggest and loudest pinball arcade. There were literally 150 machines, all dinging and flashing like mad. I had entered Pintastic. I played some pinball in college, but as a child of the 80s, I'd grown up on the video games that had pushed pinball machines out of the arcades. So then, how did I go from randomly wandering into a convention to becoming a collector, restorer, and all-around pinball fanatic? How did I end up with my basement looking like this? First, I need to make sure that you know what a pinball machine is. As a high school psychology and history teacher, I try not to make assumptions about what my audience already knows. So, there are people here today who have never seen one of these contraptions in a highway rest stop or in a dive bar, let alone played one. So, here's a modern pinball machine. Here's one from the 1970s. Clearly, there have been some changes over the decades, but the basic setup remains the same. There are buttons on the side of the cabinets that engage the flippers, and the flippers keep a stainless steel ball in play where it can ricochet off of targets, travel through lanes, sail up and down ramps, or fall into a hole. Now, all of these actions score points. To start, the player launches the ball using a spring-activated rod, and it shoots it to the top of the playfield. The downward slope of the playfield causes the ball to roll in the direction of the player. And when the ball eventually sails between the flippers or through an out lane and drains, their turn is over. And this is when the player often smacks the machine, curses at it, or storms away. The primary objective in pinball, as in life, is to remain alive. You get at least 3 turns, but when the last ball drains, it's game over. You're dead. But to understand how I went from that convention to full-fledged pinball mania, I first need to tell you about Mitchman Funkatron. See, after I left Pintastic, I started sneaking out to a local bowling alley to play. And one evening, there was this burly fellow at the machine next to me who was, as we say in the hobby, absolutely blowing up the machine. Between balls, he turned to me and introduced himself as Mitch. Now, I had seen the name Mitchman Funkatron listed as the top player on just about every machine there, so I knew I was in the presence of greatness. But Mitch, as it turns out, was just a super friendly dude, and he invited me to join the New England Pinball League. Before I knew it, I found myself descending into the basement of a suburban home nicknamed the Wicked Pissa Pinball Pit. Now, I figured out pretty quickly that pinball is like this giant underground club filled with players of different skill levels, ages, and identities, folks eager to hang out and compete and eat homemade chili, and also teach me anything I might ever want to learn about pinball. To a beginner, pinball looks like a game of chance. Just mash on the buttons and keep the ball from draining. But actually, pinball is a game of skill. It requires timing, discipline, and an exquisite sense of hand-eye coordination. Experienced players make this fact evident. They control the action of the ball rather than simply reacting to it. Just watch a drop catch in action. Here the player releases the flipper button just prior to contact. allowing them to line up their next shot. And when it appears that the ball is heading straight down the middle, you react with a slap save, which requires some rhythm and brute force. Now, even without these fancy moves, learning how to anticipate and respond will make you a better player. But this takes practice and patience, lots of patience. If your reflexes are quick and you can keep the ball from draining, you're still going to lose in competition, unless you know which targets to hit, and when, and how many times, and in what order. See, each game has its own internal logic, a narrative even, and good players know how to advance the story by sniping the right shots. In newer games, designers created a kind of pinball nirvana, the aptly titled multi-ball. If you hit just the right series of shots, more silver balls are automatically launched onto the playfield. The result is total madness. The soundtrack intensifies, the lights brighten, and players reach a state of frantic bliss, their flippers flailing as they struggle to keep all of the balls in play. Now, part of what I love so much about pinball is that it's tactile. Your fingers press the buttons. The flippers strike the ball, sending it across the playfield and into targets. And good players know how to nudge the machine or give it a bump or a side-to-side shake to control the trajectory of the ball. Still, there are limits on how rough you can be with these things. If you're too forceful, you run the risk of tilting, which abruptly cuts power to your flippers and ends your ball. When this happens, it's the pinball equivalent to the walk of shame. So clearly, pinball is pretty complex. But played at its highest level, it's about not thinking at all. It's about being purely in the moment. Conscious effort fades, and muscle memory takes over. It's a fleeting moment, but it feels like it could last forever. Psychologists call this immersive phenomenon flow. Pinballers sometimes talk about games having good flow, where one satisfying shot segues into the next, but it's this elusive flow state inside the player that makes pinball so addictive. You're just going to have to trust me on this. Although these games are filled with computer circuitry, pinball is essentially an analog kinetic pursuit. It's managing chaos. It's calculating chance on the fly and wrestling with gravity. These are big, heavy machines, old school time killers that would never fit into a pocket or a purse. And playing pinball is an unscripted pursuit, a welcome respite from our increasingly algorithm-driven, handheld, digital age. That's interesting. Sometimes the lights come on. It's like pinball. Oh, I wasn't expecting that to light up. I better go hit that. Nice. Each machine evokes its own separate universe under glass. Now, while some of these themes make plenty of sense, battling Soviet pilots in F-14 Tomcat, or playing cards in Joker Poker, I find myself drawn to the weird and hard-to-explain games. Take 1981's Embryon, for example. I see a dour spaceman and an incubating creature, but what exactly is the story here? Now, this is the second game that I fixed up, and I love its bizarreness, and it's never going to leave the collection. But probably my favorite part of resurrecting Embryon was spending time with Finn, a former student whom I commissioned to do all of the paint restoration. So having seen the top side of these beautiful machines, I feel duty-bound to show you what's happening inside. And yes, I know, it's intimidating. I felt that way too. There's half a mile of wire in here, switches and relays galore, and in newer machines, so many electronics. But once I realized that I actually wanted to own one of these machines, I knew I'd at least have to learn the basics so as not to set the thing on fire. Fortunately, the world of pinball is filled with autodidacts, folks who have taught themselves how to fix and maintain their machines and are willing to spread that knowledge. Thank goodness for friends like John, an electrical engineer who spent every Thursday evening for a year teaching me how to solder solenoids, adjust score reels, and rebuild flipper assemblies. The silver ball has seeped into my professional life as well. I wanted my ninth grade world history students to see how these games could be a unique form of storytelling. Thanks to a grant, they designed and created their own miniature cardboard machines after researching different elements of the Cold War. Now, these Pinbox 3000 kits were a memorable way to introduce the hobby to the next generation of potential pinballers. And some of my psychology students also got in on the fun. So clearly, I like a lot about pinball, but there is one aspect of these games that's simply impossible to ignore. It's the blatant misogyny. Yes, these machines are toys, but they're also cultural artifacts that were originally designed to attract adolescent boys and to take their quarters. And they reflect a rather garish and clearly offensive version of the male gaze. As unsettling as the artwork can be, the pinball community is incredibly welcoming and egalitarian. I play with hipsters and punk rockers, trans players, fellow suburban dads. In League, there are coders, scientists, musicians, and bud tenders. The women of Boston's Bells and Chimes have introduced many to the sisterhood of pinball. So for me and my fellow pinheads, the focus is on hanging out and playing and having fun. It's not about religion. It's not about politics or anything else that divides us. I'm convinced if more people just played together, we'd have a less polarized world. So will pinball save us all? No. But in a way, it has saved me. Now, I know that sounds a little lofty, but what I mean is simply this. In an era when people are more screen addicted and creatively stagnant, pinball has given me a community, a chance to learn about 20 new skills, and also the magnificent dividend of flow, of living purely in the moment. It's kept me from growing old, or at least from feeling old. So obviously, I'll be heartbroken if you don't play the next pinball machine that you see. There are two out there. But really what I want to tell you today is this. Heed your curiosity. The next time you find yourself in some random hotel and you hear the clatter and the chimes, frisk your pockets for quarters and head toward the flashing lights. Thank you.